Welcome to the Embracing Neuro-Diversity podcast, where I share my journey of embracing the experience of my amazing son who is on the spectrum. I am Ivory, a mother, educator, and personal growth enthusiast. My goal is to offer insight and stories that may inspire you on your own parenting journey. Thank you for tuning in. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Welcome back. Thank you for tuning in per usual. It is Friday morning. I've been up since 4 a.m. I should say. You all probably know by now that I am such an early bird. I love mornings. I love the quietness that it brings. I love seeing the sun rise if it is that time of year. I love being able to hear my thoughts. And I am just allowed a lot of uninterrupted time, which is so important to me. I feel like I'm finally getting settled. The last podcast I recorded 2 weeks ago, I was explaining to you all that I was in the middle of moving, and projects for work were demanding a lot of my time. And of course, parenting is paramount. And so making sure that I spend quality time with Khalil and preparing him for the school year. And so it has been a wonderful summer and honestly a really beautiful time for me in the past couple of weeks and months, but it has demanded a lot of my time in a way that hasn't allowed me to invest into recording my podcast on a regular basis, and certainly not the video version, because the house is coming together. My home is coming together, I should say, but it's not quite where I want it to be. And so I need that to be right before I begin the video podcast. But needless to say that I am really grateful to have this platform to even continue on this journey, to share knowledge, to unpack my own thoughts. And quite honestly, it is in a lot of ways therapeutic for me to sort of speak aloud about the things I'm processing as it relates to being an autism mom. And so with that, I have you all know that my platform is primarily to support parents on their journey of embracing their child. And I fundamentally believe that the primary way to do that is when you embrace yourself, and that looks like giving yourself an incredible amount of grace and patience. And at the highest level, it is truly loving yourself unconditionally. And then that reverberates to your children. However, I am very clear that that is easier said than done, and it requires a lot of internal work. It requires unpacking a lot of your mindsets and the things that you've been taught over time. And in a lot of ways, it requires you to let go of the old version of yourself, which you have to be ready and prepared for. And so I understand that my platform is not always for everyone. It is for someone who is seeking to grow and to parent their child in a way that is best for their child, not in a way that is best for society or for their comfort, right? And so with that, I am embarking upon this journey of creating a segment for the podcast that is going to be called Wellness Within, in which I discuss where I am on my own journey towards self-care and personal development. And I'd love to also talk to other parents of neurodiverse children about where they are on their journey as it relates to self-care and personal development, so that perhaps it can help someone else on their journey. But ultimately, the goal is to promote the idea that parents who put themselves first in terms of their own self-care, in terms of their health, their mental health, their physical health, their emotional health, are the best parents for their children. And so I don't know if you all have heard of this concept before. I read about it maybe over a year ago, and then it came back up when one of my business partners, who is also an autism mom, she brought it up in one of her pitches. And I'm a fundamental believer that when a message comes back around, that is something that you should be aware of and revisit for your own learning. And it's this idea that parents of autism children, well, there was research done that indicated that parents of autism children, and they specifically did the study with moms, and so I'll speak specifically to that moms of autism children had the stress level of that is equivalent to a combat soldier. And they discovered this through a series of surveys and questions. They also found in a study that during the self-assessment, when moms would answer the questions for themselves, that they indicated that the stress was lower than what the researchers had gathered and observed in their own observations and gathering of their questions, right? And so it says a lot about, oftentimes we're not even aware of the level of stress that we are under as parents. We're not aware of, or sometimes we don't like to speak about it candidly and openly or transparently, because we don't want to convey that it is our child's fault, or we don't want to convey that there is some sort of disdain for our child. But I am a fundamental believer that when you speak your truth, that you then can heal it, and you also give other people permission to do the same. And that's not to say that you are required to, because again, we are all on our own journey, but it is also something incredibly cathartic and releasing, like you sort of release a burden when you tell the truth about how you're feeling. And so with that, I started to think about this segment, Wellness Within, and what do I want to ask people? What story do I want to convey? What do I want people to know, whether you are an autism parent or you are a supporter of autism families? Like, what do we want you to know about our lived experience? And ultimately, how does this support the community as a whole and our children who will eventually grow to be adults in society, right? That is the ultimate goal. And then there are also layers to this, right? Because stress shows up differently for different subgroups of people, different demographics. Some people's stress levels are higher, perhaps if you are a single parent or if you're in a marriage. One way or the other, your stress could be higher in a marriage, because there are a lot of studies that show that marriages suffer when you have a neurodiverse child, or when both parents have discovered. Some marriages get stronger. Some, when as it relates to being a single parent, as is the case for me, having to do more of the heavy lifting on your own could increase your stress level. But then on the other end, for me, it's me and Khalil for the most part. And so I don't always have to manage other people's experiences or emotions when it comes to the dynamic of Khalil, right? And that's not to say that I don't experience it. I do. I definitely have my own journey when it comes to parenting and co-parenting and all of those things. But I think about a lot on the day to day, the dynamic of a family with siblings and um, a marriage, and how having one or multiple children who are on the autism spectrum, like how does that impact? In some ways it could be incredibly rewarding, and because everybody is on board and supporting, and in other ways I can imagine it could be stressful, and similar to my experience and other perhaps single moms experiences. On one end, it can feel even more isolating when you have a child who is neurodiverse and specifically on the autism spectrum, when you're raising your child primarily alone. But then on the other end, you get to invest more time and energy in raising your child in the way that is best for the both of you, but mostly what's best for your child, right? You get a little bit more of that brain space to do that. You don't have to divide your time between, multiple children, if that is like your journey, right? Like, it's different for every parent, every family structure, and that is okay. There is no right or wrong way to embark upon this journey. The key is to be always be incredibly mindful of, as a parent, how you are showing up with your child, with your family, and what are you modeling for them, and how can you operate at your highest level. And the primary way to do that, I've learned, is to love on yourself first through your practices of self-care, that ensure that your mind and your body are healthy enough to stay the course, right? If this study is indicating that the stress levels of autism parents are the equivalent of a combat soldier, the first question that I have thereafter is, well, how does one survive such a journey if that is the case? And the reality is, if you don't incorporate those self-care strategies, if you don't embark on a journey of personal development, it is incredibly hard to not only survive, but thrive on a journey such as this. And so I want to unpack that for our parents in a real way. I don't know a world where people are talking specifically to parents of neurodiverse children about how they are caring for themselves. And so that is very important to me. So this podcast episode, more or less, is more around me unpacking by asking a few reflection questions, as opposed to providing you all with like a list of strategies as I've done in the past, or tools and tips. It is really like, I want this episode to be more around like questions and reflection. So maybe you can also sit and think about these for yourself. And the intention behind it is because I believe that questions are more powerful than answers, because it allows individuals to come to the answer for themselves as opposed to being told what it should be, right? And so in that, I have been thinking a lot about what self-care means. It's such a buzzword that people, speak about off in different industries on different platforms. But where I am right now in this season of my life, for me, self-care, how I define it, and my question to you is, how do you define it first? But how I've chosen to define it is being radically gentle with myself. And so what I am actually doing is, every time a negative thought comes up about myself that I have created about myself, I immediately stop in that moment and say, stop. Don't talk about myself like that. Or don't talk about her like that. Like, I'm parenting myself in this season of my life, but And I'm really focusing on the words that I speak about myself and stopping the negative thoughts and the judgmental opinions that I have of myself. And in my commitment to stopping that, I am learning that it happens more often than I had originally realized. And I was like, wow, like if I am this judgmental towards myself and I speak this negatively about myself and I've been doing this for years, what impact has that had on my health, really mental, physical, spiritual health, right? And so I don't dwell in that, but I recognize it. And now, like every time that a negative thought comes up, I immediately am like, no, stop. Nope, don't do that. You are fine. I love you. You got this. You're doing great. You are doing wonderful. Even if you don't believe it, you got to say it, right? And so for me, that is how I'm defining self-care in this season, is being mindful of how I speak about myself. And of course I do other things. I try to, drink my water and have a good balance of healthy habits, but primarily I'm being mindful of how I speak about myself, because for me that is the foundation of everything. And so that is the question that I offer to you as well. How do you define self-care for yourself? I'm also wondering too, if as an autism parent, you are aware of what is happening with your body or your mind when you are stressed. Like, do you know when you're stressed? Do you know what the indicators are? How does your body feel? Do you get overwhelmed? Does your stomach start to ache? Do you have lower back pain? Do you get migraines? Does your anxiety increase? What are some of the physical responses when you know you're stressed, right? It's important to know what those are so that you can first intervene and do the things that are necessary to minimize your stress and to stop the physical responses, but also to begin on the journey to prevent them, right? And so think about that as well as you're on this journey of thinking about how to remain well as you are parenting your child. Another thing that came from the study around autism parent stress levels being equivalent of that of a combat soldier was that the stress didn't come from any cognitive delays that their child may have, or not it didn't come from the diagnosis itself. Interestingly enough, the researchers found that the stress came from the social connections and support that parents often felt like they didn't have, or the social isolation that comes with having a child who is different, right? And so if that is a question that you can relate to, or if that is an experience you can relate to, I would also encourage you to ask yourself, how do you feel connected to others, right? Like other parents who have your lived experience. I highly recommend that you find another parent friend who is also an autism parent, because there is a unique experience that only we understand, and there's a lot of things that you don't have to explain, and we just know. And you can bring your children together and play without, as an autism parent, you are constantly having to apologize, or all of these things that we often find ourselves doing. Which, side note, stop apologizing. But we find ourselves doing when we are in neurotypical spaces with neurotypical children and parents, right? But the social connection piece is real. So having people who are neurotypical in your life is important too, because they need to see the lived experience. But having someone who also is an autism parent that you can connect with and build a bond with is so essential on this journey. Trust me, because even just being in that energy to be like, I know, don't worry about it, it goes so far. I'm also wondering because we're human beings first. We're not just parents. We have other responsibilities, other interests, other goals that we have set for ourselves. And so I'm wondering for you as a parent, how are you balancing the demands of parenting with other responsibilities in your life and other desires in your life, right? Whether it is cultivating relationships, whether it is going after dreams that you have for yourself. Don't give up on your dreams. Sometimes we tend to give up because we're focusing only on supporting our child, but don't give up the same way you're choosing not to give up on your child. Don't give up on yourself, because then you're teaching your child how to live as well. And so what are the goals that you have for yourself? And are you sticking to that? I promise you that will help you stay the course. And make sure those goals are balanced too. Like, is there a goal around your health? Is there a goal around your financial status? Is there a goal around a career aspiration? Is there a goal around your social life, your dating life, traveling? Like, start to implement those goals. Like, I want parents to know that, specifically autism parents, that your life does not have to stop. Your life does not end here. In fact, it can actually grow and prosper from here if you take the lessons that we're learning from this experience as autism parents, the characteristics that we're learning, and you apply it to your life in a way that feels good and healthy and sustainable, that you yet and still can thrive. And then lastly, before I close out this week's episode, is the future planning piece. I speak a lot about having a routine and then setting goals for yourself and your child. 1 year goal, 5 year goals, 10-year goals. Start with 1 year, and if you are feeling ambitious, go ahead and go to 5. I have a poster board in my home of a 5-year plan that breaks down for myself and Khalil of the things that I want us to accomplish, both in our personal lives, but also externally, in terms of the things that I want us to do. I want to see different countries I want us to see, or for example, I'm working on my yoga certification, so that's a goal within the next 2 years. And for Khalil, I want him to increase his social skills and have a community of people that he feels comfortable and safe with. And so that is a goal of ours for my son. But I also want us to, Khalil and myself, to travel more. I have a list of countries that I want us to see together. And so these are goals that I've put on our board, and I've created strategies on how to get there. And sometimes I don't always meet the milestone, but I never give up on the goal. I just reroute or speed up on certain areas and slow down in others, right? And so it's the idea of, this is a self-care strategy for me. It's the idea of never giving up on yourself. And so I'm going to leave with these two questions around the future planning for yourself and your child. Number one, what are your biggest concerns or hopes for the future, both for yourself and your child, and how do you plan to address or achieve them? Sit and let that marinate for you. What are your biggest concerns, and then what are your hopes? It's important for you to unpack what your biggest concerns are, because then you can begin to think about ways to minimize those concerns, ways to intervene and do what is necessary to lessen the likelihood of those concerns being a reality. And of course, thinking about your hopes and your desires for the future. How do you want to feel? Where do you want to live? How do you want to experience life, right? And the last question, few years. Wherever you are on the journey as it relates to your self-care and your well-being, where do you want that to go over time? And what steps can you take now towards that? For example, I think a lot about I want to be more disciplined when it comes to my physical well-being. I'd love to run a marathon one day. I'd love to have a yoga studio one day, right? Like I'm really into how does the body show up for your mental health too. And so like that's how I like to evolve. But first I'm starting with how I speak about myself first, right? And so that is an example that I want to offer to you so you can begin to think about your own future planning for yourself, then your child. And so with that, I'm going to end there. I'm I also want to apologize that my nose is stuffy. I have a cold with Khalil returning from uh, back to school. It's been a week. Of course, the germs, the children, he has come home with a bit of a cough. Thankfully, he did not get a cold, but of course, I got one and it is okay. We are here and we are going to continue to move forward. Slow motion is better than no motion. So, until next time, take care of yourself.